There are already HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems in Ukraine, and the results of their application are quite impressive. How exactly will they facilitate the Ukrainian army launching a counteroffensive? What other MLRS should the country expect from its allies in the near future? The answers to these and more are in today's video. Let's dive in. A multiple launch rocket system is a complex, consisting of a launcher with multiple charges, projectiles, and other auxiliary components, such as transport or transport loading vehicles and such. The primary purpose of such guns is to combat armored vehicles and infantry dispersed over a large area, as well as the destruction of strategic enemy infrastructure like an airstrip. Although there are several types of MLRS, modular or container multiple launch rocket systems are rightfully considered the most powerful. These are able to shoot several types of shells at once, are easier to upgrade, and their reloading takes 10 times less time than their tubular predecessors. Among this type, the most advanced MLRS today are the American M142 HIMARS and its big brother, the M270 MLRS. Let's start with the latter, since it was this one that became the cornerstone of this family of weapons. The US began actively looking at the MLRS after the 1973 Yom Kippur War, when they were assessing the effectiveness of the Israeli army destroying enemy forces via MLRSs. Realizing that in the event of a large-scale war in Europe, such weapons would play an important role. The US Army had, by 1974, formulated requirements for a new rocket launcher called the General Support Rocket System, or GSRS. The project piqued the interest of America's allies in the NATO bloc, among other entities, since they had already tried to previously create such weapons. By joining forces, the result of many hours of work from specialists all over the world was not long in coming. Boeing and Vought Aerospace were overall responsible for the development of the MLRS. Production models first appeared in 1982, and the initial battery of operational M270s was formed just a year later. By that time, the gun had received the name much more familiar to most of us, the M270 MLRS Self-Propelled Loading Launcher, or SPLL. This platform consists of three subsystems: the M269 Loading Launch Module, the Electronic Fire Control System, and the M993 Transport Vehicle, a derivative of the Bradley chassis. One M270, firing 12 M26 rockets, dropped a 7,728 bomb payload equivalent. Just one battery of such MLRS can reach an incredible firepower equivalent to 33 Canyon artillery battalions. The MLRS strikes enemies with missiles housed in two interchangeable containers or modules, each of which can hold 6 M26 or GMLRS missiles, 2 of the latest PRSM missiles, or 1 ground-to-ground ATACMS. Shells can be launched both individually or in volleys of 2 to 12, depending on the task at hand. The M26 missiles underwent trial by fire during Operation Desert Storm in 1991, having made it possible to hit targets at a distance of up to 20 miles. With their improved versions, the M26A1 and M26A2 worked at a distance of up to 28 miles. But this was not without its downsides. These missiles are unguided, so one cannot necessarily talk about high precision here. As a more modern-looking missile, the M31 GMLRS takes the M270 to the next level. These GPS-enabled precision-guided missiles were used extensively by the US Army during the Iraq War. While remaining out of reach of enemy artillery, launchers with M31 GMLRS missiles hit forward command posts, clusters of enemy equipment, and cannon artillery at coordinates transmitted from counter-battery radars and aerial reconnaissance equipment. The effective range of the GMLRS sits anywhere between 9.3 and 55.9 miles, depending on the type of ammunition used. For example, Germany put the M31 into service with a range of up to 55.9 miles, and Lockheed Martin at the beginning of 2021 tested the new ER GMLRS capable of covering a distance of 93 miles. Granted, operational readiness by 2025 is really the idea in mind regarding production of the latter, and Finland has already become the first foreign customer to declare its intention to purchase this ammunition. Most of all, the enemy should fear the M270, loaded with guided missiles from the ATACMS family, capable of hitting targets at a distance of 86.9 to 186.4 miles. These literally transform the M270 and M142 from multiple launch rocket systems into tactical systems with a range greater than that of the Soviet Tochka-U or the Ukrainian vilkha-m MLRS. In the future, MLRSs will also acquire even more impressive smart missiles, precision strike missile. The series of GPS-guided missiles will replace ATACMS from 2024. These are equipped with a new area warhead and can strike the enemy at a distance of 37.2 to 310 miles. But to date, PRSM missiles are still in the initial production stage. The first batch of 110 missiles is set to be transferred to the U.S. military within a year, with approval planned to take place in 2023. Although apparently deliveries of the M270 to Ukraine have already started. Not too long ago, members of the armed forces of Ukraine shared a photo with the MLRS M270 in it. What we most likely saw in the photo was 2 of the 3 MLRS transferred by the UK. Given that Britain has its own MLRS modification, AFU soldiers might possibly acquire a version of the M270B1, similar to the M270A1, but with improved crew protection armor. According to the agreements between Norway and Britain, the latter took on transferring the GPS-enhanced M270 to Ukraine in return for upgrading the decommissioned Norwegian MLRS. Additionally, let's not forget about the recent promise of Germany to supply its own versions of the M270, the MARS 2 MLRS-E. The German version of the MLRS can fire up to 12 unguided 230mm rockets per minute, and the European Fire Control System integrated into the installation allows the launch of GMLRS missiles, expanding the base range of the MLRS from 31 to 43.5 miles. Other differences between the MARS 2 and the standard M270 include a fully automatic nitrogen fire suppression system and the new electrical launch drive system from Krauss-Maffei-Wegmann. Having replaced the hydraulic ones, the cost of future maintenance on the installations was significantly reduced. In June of this year, German Defense Minister Christine Lambrecht announced the transfer of 3 MARS 2 with GMLRS missiles from the Bundeswehr warehouses. Taking into account the recently received PZH-2000 self-propelled guns and other assistance from the Germans, we can safely say that, along with France, Germany has revised its policy regarding the transfer of heavy weapons, prioritizing the safety of the civilian population of Ukraine and the protection of its sovereignty from Russian occupiers. Now that the main card's out in the open, time to show the trump card out. Successor to the M270, the M142 HIMARS is a lightweight MLRS developed in the late 1990s for the U.S. Army. Unlike the MLRS, the HIMARS can accommodate only 1 capsule with 6 GMLRS, 2 PRSM, or 1 ATACMS missiles mounted on a 5-ton truck of a new family of medium tactical vehicles. Simply put, this system's force is about 50% of the M270. However, in return, HIMARS offers high mobility, which today just fits perfectly into Ukrainian artillery firing on the principle of maneuver, fire, maneuver. Due to its modest dimensions, the M142 can be transported using the Lockheed C-130 Hercules. Furthermore, the system's short deployment time and quick firing of volleys allows one to quickly deploy it long before the enemy even thinks about striking back. On May 31, 2022, the White House announced the delivery of 4 M142 HIMARS with M31 GMLRS missiles for training purposes, with shipments increasing as hostilities develop. By June 23, the first HIMARS arrived in Ukraine. Since then, warehouses with weapons for the Russian invaders in the Donetsk and Lugansk regions can be seen from space, now that they're being lit up. Artillerymen of the armed forces of Ukraine have demonstrated high accuracy, hitting both multiple targets and individual strategically important ones located in Ukraine. As of July 10, Biden has confirmed the transfer of yet another package of military assistance to Ukraine amounting to $400 million. This one includes 4 more HIMARS, bringing the total number in service with the armed forces of Ukraine to 12 units. At the same time, the range of ammunition for the previously delivered MLRS was up to 43.5 miles, but now we are talking about an even greater distance. And although there's been no official data so far on the transfer of ATACMS projectiles, some media sources claim that we're looking at missiles with a range of more than 120 miles. Speaking about the MLRS being in the hands of the armed forces of Ukraine, it would be unfair not to mention the Ukrainian army's own weapons and captured multiple rocket launchers, inherited from the Russian invaders fleeing in a panic. The most popular MLRS in service with the ground forces of Ukraine are the BM-30 Smerch, of which the Ukraine has about 81, and the BM-27 Uragan, of which there are about 70 units. In fact, the Smerch is a continuation of the Uragan, with a key difference in the diameter of the ammunition used and the effective range. So while the maximum range of the BM-27 missiles is about 43 miles, the BM-30 goes out to about 74.5 miles. As for the differences in the shells used by the Soviet MLRS, the Uragan system is loaded with 220mm rockets launched from 16 tubes installed in the rear of the chassis. With the Smerch, we're talking about 12 launch tubes with 300mm rockets inside. In addition to Soviet copies, one should also not discount Ukraine's own developments, such as Vilkha and vilkha-m. For the first time ever, this complex came to be known in January of 2016, and the first test fires were carried out in March of that same year. 3 years later, missiles were launched from the upgraded vilkha-m complex, which had improved fuel energy, improved control and navigation systems, and also a greater effective range, up to 80 miles. In just 48 seconds, the Vilkha can fire a full salvo of 12 missiles capable of hitting a target at a distance of 43.5 to 125.5 miles. Although the latest version of the vilkha-M2 missiles, which have an operating range of more than 120 miles, is still at the testing range and is not currently in operations with the armed forces of Ukraine. The Vilkha missile's main feature is that their flight is corrected using 90 impulse engines located in several rows outside the control unit. According to representatives from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, the Vilkha-M entered service with the armed forces of Ukraine in 2020, and in 2021, there were plans to begin mass production of missiles for these MLRS. At the start of March 2022, the creator of the complex, the GKKB Lush, reported to the General Staff of Ukraine that the domestic MLRS was used by Ukrainian fighters from the first day of the invasion by the Russian occupational forces and had landed about 50 well-aimed hits on enemy targets. In addition to their own stocks, according to Oryx, by April 2022, the armed forces of Ukraine managed to capture more than 1,000 armored vehicles from the invaders. Among them were those MLRS that the occupiers used while shelling the civilian housing and infrastructure. Thus, the total number of BM-21 Grad taken from the Russians was more than 20 units, 1 BM-27 Uragan, and 1 2B-17 Tornado G, and 4 TOS-1A. With such a replenishment of ammunition for the guns already with the armed forces of Ukraine and the regular deliveries of missile systems from allies, Ukraine will be even more confident in turning the Russian invaders into fertilizer, clearing its territory of these monsters step by step. But what do you think? How many MLRS does Ukraine need to kick the Russian occupiers out of their lands? Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell for more content like today's. See you in the next one.